there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a small world.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. In
It's
fact,
ama-
I guess my cousin's husband was, they don't call them mayors of Jamestown. Well, Frewsburg was right next door. He was the town, whatever they call it, town council, town. It's not mayor, but it's the same thing. But yeah,
It's a little bit different in that corner of New York. I think my classmates were probably 45% Italian. The other 45% were Swedish. And then there's a few English and other people mixed in there, but very unique town where the high school taught Italian and Swedish first, and then some other languages.
yeah, I've got relatives in Rochester, New York. I've never met, so I had to invite them to the wedding, but I've never met them. So, well, thanks for everyone being here today. It is our monthly mastermind. My name is Shawn Lacagnina, and I'll be kind of hosting this right now, along with Troy Weber up there, who's really running all the controls. So bear with us. So our goal today is to introduce you to a concept that we've been talking about really over the months, but it kind of came out of how many people here were able to participate with the Productivity Ninja event that we had last month. How many were here? If you missed it, you really missed something special. But out of that is kind of where this conversation is kind of evolving, and it's really around this whole idea of time management and how do we be more productive in our daily lives. So I've got about a 15-minute little presentation to kind of throw out there to get us started in thinking along that line, and the rest of the time will be up to us to kind of talk about that subject and pull out what we think might be the best practices for each of us kind of moving forward. Are there any questions, concerns, anything before we get started anyone would like to bring up?
I was just wondering if there would be a recording of last month's session that I missed.
There are recordings of the masterminds, but not a recording of the special event that we ran, unfortunately. And we do plan to do events like that on a more regular basis. But yes, the masterminds we do record and post, so you'll be able to check this one out here in the near future. Well, let's go ahead and jump into it, unless anyone else has anything else that they'd like to bring up before we get started. And this can be as interactive as you want. Don't hesitate to ask questions. Yeah, I do a well enough job of throwing myself off, so you're not going to interrupt me. That's for darn sure. So let's start here. Can everybody see my screen? Fantastic. So this number, what does this number represent to anyone? Any ideas? Now, one rule, everybody cannot talk at once.
The number of seconds in a day.
That is correct. Who said that?
It's Philip.
Philip, good job, brother. It is the number of seconds that each of us has in each and every day. Now, the important thing about that is we all get the same number of seconds. We can't expand it, create more. It is what it is. And it's not prejudiced against anyone. We all get the same number of seconds each and every day. So this thing about time that we have to understand to begin with is that time is inelastic. It can't be stretched. It's indispensable, right? All work, everything that we want to accomplish really requires time. It's irreplaceable. There's no substitute for it, right? And it is perishable. It can't be saved. It can't be preserved. It can't be stored. Once time is gone, it is really gone, and it is gone forever. I think way too often we take this concept of time for granted. So my goal is to really talk about how do we not just survive a busy life, because we're all busy, but how do we thrive? And coming out of the meeting with the Ninja Productivity, this was a concept he really pushed hard, is that we all have busy and we're just getting busier, right? That the technology that was supposed to save us time only seems to increase what's expected of us. Can we all relate to that? And so how do we not only survive this busy life, but how do we thrive? And I can tell you with every client that I'm working with currently, and in fact, really that I've been working with over the past year, this issue of time management has been critical. More direct is the question of how do we decide where we're going to spend our time to have the most impact in our lives, both professionally and personally. So we're not separating our lives, right? We have one life and it involves our professional side and our personal side, and the time invokes all of that. So this verse, plan your work and work your plan, has been something that's been a constant in my entire business career, some 38, 39 years. In fact, the first day of the first really professional sales training I ever took a part of was in Atlanta, Georgia. And above the door in the training room was this phrase. And it wasn't written there in a temporary fashion as what I remembered. It was in tiles above this door. And this was a 100-year-old printing company based out of Atlanta. And it said, plan your work and work your plan. And it comes out in Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, something that Andrew Carnegie commissioned. And this concept, like I say, has always stuck with me. You know, you plan your life, you plan the decades that make up your life, you plan the years that make up the decades, the months that make up the years, the week that makes up the months, and the days that make up the weeks. And for me, as a professional salesperson, it was planning the events that were going to make up my day. And I would say that that has nothing to do with being in sales. We should each plan the events that are going to make up our day to be most effective. Jim Rohn says that you should never begin the day until it's finished on paper first. So this constant theme of time management is to plan your work and then work that plan. And again, your day, your week, your month, your year, your life. So how do we attempt to do this? Again, we've already stated we're all busy and we're getting busier. How do we do this? Well, Brian Tracy, someone near and dear to all the focal point people, he says to look upon time management as a vehicle, something that takes us from where we are to where we want to be in the future. Now, this applies to a lot of things, you know, and in business and in sales, that's what we do with our clients, right? We look at our client, we figure out where are they and where do they want to go and how are we going to help them get there? Well, in life, when we're dealing with a friend or a loved one or a child, we're doing the same thing, right? We're looking and saying, okay, here's where you are, here's where you want to go. How do we do there? Well, time management is this same activity, and it's not some peripheral activity or skill. It's actually a very core skill upon which everything else that we do depends. So if it takes us from where we are to where we want to be in the future, that means that we have to have certain things in place in order to do that. Makes sense, right? So time management is really this ability that each of us has to control a sequence of events. And the key to that is that you get to control the sequence. You get to choose the sequence of events in your schedule, whether that's for the year or for the week or the month or today. You decide. So that's really what time management is. And I call it priority management. So that begs the question, how do I determine my priorities? Well, goals, right? Time management begins and ends with our goals. And we can't overemphasize this point. So who here has goals both professionally and personally? Raise your hand. You got goals? Hopefully, I can't see everyone, but I hope everyone's raising their hand. So let me ask you this. So you've got goals, keep your hand up. Are they written down? If they're written down, keep your hand up. Some hands are dropping. Now, they're written down. How many have reviewed them recently? Nancy's hanging in there. Greg's hanging in there, right? So think about that, because time management isn't really about managing your time. We've already talked about the fact that we can't do that, right? We can't control time. Time, that 86,400 seconds, it moves regardless of what you do. So we're really managing priorities. In fact, Stephen Covey, who's I consider one of my true mentors, said that the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. And that's very backwards of what most people do. So we're not gonna prioritize what's on our schedule. We're gonna schedule our priorities. Yet how many of us work off a to-do list? Right? And is that list sorted? No. What is that list? It's what's most urgent, right? The ninja that we spent so much time with started off by talking about how we're human beings and that what happens in our head is as much as important as the tech we use to sort all that out. And he said that when he started his presentation, he asked for three things from us. And I think while we're going through this, do the same thing yourself. What will you start? What will you stop? And what will you continue? So what will you start? What will you stop? And what will you continue? And I think it's a great way to really approach almost any webinar that you're part of, and especially a mastermind. But when he got to this concept of the to-do list, he said, if you look at your to-do list and you make sure that it's complete for today. So if you really put everything on there that you think you want to accomplish, the average person has 10 days worth of activities on their to-do list. The average person. So if we have 10 days of activities on our to-do list, how do we decide what the most important 10% are? Because that's really all we're probably going to get through today. And that's if we're organized. Well, if you don't have goals, and if we do have goals, we're not constantly aware of those goals, that gets really, really hard. So if you don't have goals, or if you haven't looked at your goals recently, I recommend that you at least create goals in 4 areas: your health and wellness, your relationships and family, your finance, and then your business goals. So health and wellness, I mean, that's an obvious one, right? If we're not taking care of ourselves, of this body, the one body that we have, the rest of it kind of really doesn't matter. And then your family and your relationships. Most of us would say, yeah, that's really, really important to us. So what are our goals in that? And, most people don't think about goals when it comes to family and friends and the relationships in our lives. And you might have different roles. Stephen Covey talks about roles in a lot of aspects. You may be a leader at a company. You may be a leader in a team at a company. You may be a father or a mother. You're definitely a son or a daughter. All those different roles in your lives, what are your goals for those? And then finance overall, what are you trying to accomplish, or what's important to accomplish overall? We're not just talking business, but what do you need to do the things that you want to do in your life? And that's going to be different for all of us. Doesn't mean we're all striving to be millionaires. What are we trying to accomplish? What's important to us in that? And then our business goals to help us in all of those aspects. So at least concentrate on those 4 areas. And I know most of us, everybody's probably familiar with this. And I know there's a lot of talk right now that it's outdated, it doesn't work. Well, it hadn't been around for centuries because it doesn't work. Smart goals are important. Make them specific. You have to know what you're trying to do and how. It's simply a clear vision. Then make them measurable. How are you going to know when you get there? Pretty straightforward. It's got to be attainable. Now, I know there's a lot of controversy over this. Is it going to be a stretch goal, big hairy goal, all of those things. My advice is to make it attainable. You have to be able to visualize a path to success. So it's got to be realistic. If you can't visualize yourself getting there, it's not really a goal because you don't believe it. If you don't believe it, you're not going to achieve it. You've got no shot. So yeah, stretch yourself, but can you see a way of getting there? And then it's got to be relevant. It's got to align with who you are, with what your values are, with what your priorities in life are. If it falls outside of that, again, you're not going to believe it. You're not going to achieve it. And then put some sort of time base to it, a timeline for achievement. If you just do those 5 things, you'll really start to get more of a priority on what your goals really stand for. And then Covey talks about this, and the ninja talked about it as well, this time management matrix. It really comes from Dwight Eisenhower. He used it as a general, he used it as president. He took all of his priorities, all of his things that he felt like he had to do, and he put it into 4 quadrants. He separated what's important from not important and from urgent to not urgent, right? Pretty straightforward. And quadrant one is both urgent and important. These are the things that are emergencies in our lives, right? They're problems that require our immediate attention. It can include health emergencies, a work deadline, an important client that calls, a broken down car. It's things you can't ignore because they're important, and unfortunately it's an urgent. It has to happen now. And some things you can't prevent from being urgent. But if you attend to the important tasks that include prevention and maintenance, you can limit the time you have to spend here. Take driving a car, for example. If your car runs out of gas and stops, you're now in an urgent and important situation. However, if we'd have taken the time to put gas in the tank when it was important but not urgent, the car'd still be running and you would have avoided the situation. Same thing goes for other areas of our lives, right? Personal care. Exercise is important, but it's not urgent. But if we neglect it for too long, we're going to create a very urgent situation for ourselves. And personally, I would tell you not to avoid the mental and emotional self-care. It's easy to put those things off, but if you delay that kind of stuff for too long, things like meditation, which we see how important that is, or just whatever relaxes you, that buildup of stress and anxiety can really lead to a exhaustion or a mental breakdown. So procrastination and neglect in quadrants can create problems for us. And that leads us to quadrant two. This is the important but not urgent. It's the quality quadrant. This is where we do all that preventative stuff, that maintenance, the long-term planning, the relationship building. This is where we do those personal leadership things and we start to evaluate everything in our life and what we're doing. It's deep thinking, to use the ninja's word. Where are we doing that critical thinking? And how do we do that? Now, I'll tell you, the more time you spend in quadrant two, as I've already alluded to, the less time you might have to spend in quadrant one. In fact, the ninja reminded us to slow down to be brilliant. So that's quadrant two. Spending time in quadrant two reduces the frequency and the intensity of all those activities, most of them in quadrant one. Now, quadrant three is not important, but it could be urgent. Now, this is the quadrant of deception. You got to really be careful here. I think we would all agree we want to spend time in quadrant one and quadrant two, more in quadrant two if we can help it. But quadrant three often looks like a quadrant one. It looks like it's urgent because this could be someone that, interrupts our day. They show up at your cubicle or at your door of your office, or they're calling you on the phone and they've got something that's pressing they want your attention on, but it may not fall in line with your priorities. And that's where you really have to pay attention. Is this something that's urgent to me? Is this something that's important to me? We really have to make sure, things like that ringing phone, being invited to meetings that really have no purpose. And again, as I said, that unexpected guest that kind of pops in and wants to gossip and do things like that. So really evaluate those quadrants. That can be a time killer. And then quadrant four, these are things that, they call it the quadrant of waste. There's activities that had no value to our life. Now, it doesn't mean we don't spend some time in there. And if we had more time to talk about time management, we could talk about where we might want to spend 5 or 10 minutes every hour just decompressing and doing mindless activities. But we know we're in quadrant four and we know we're limiting our time there. But when we get into gossiping or mindless television or hours and hours of just mindless scrolling through social media, that's quadrant four, right? When we get sucked into that email trail, we want to spend an hour sorting our email because we feel like we're actually checking boxes. That's probably quadrant four activities. So pay attention to that. So how do we do all this? How do we know what's important to talk about the ninja? Well, he had some advice for us in that area, and I loved his definitions. He talked about important versus urgent, and he said important was quality and impact. It must be done right. That's important. Well, think about that. That's quadrant two stuff, right? it's quality, it has impact, and we've got to do it right. We got to get our goals right. We have to really understand our priorities. We have to sharpen our saw. We have to take those re-energizing vacations. We have to spend time physical fitness and eating correctly. That's all quadrant 2 stuff. Urgent is a response. It's got to be done right now. Well, as we all know, when we do things quickly, it's probably not our best work, but we can't avoid doing that. So here's a real good way to determine important or unimportant. Has to do with consequences. So something is important or unimportant to the degree of the consequence for doing or not doing that task. So a real easy way to remember that is no consequence, there ain't no value in that task. If I don't take action on this and nothing is going to change, why am I doing it? So something is important or unimportant to the degree of the consequence for doing or not doing that task. So what are the consequences of doing this? It's a real good question to ask yourself. In fact, the ninja reminds us that how we start our day is really important. If we start our day reacting, more times than not, we spend the entire day reacting. So he talked about jumping out of bed and grabbing your phone and start to respond or react to email. That typically that sends us down that path and it sucks our time from the majority of the day. So let's go back to that to-do list that we all work off of some sort. If it's not sorted, look at that list and think about what are the items on here that I must do? And maybe we put an A next to those. What must I do? And then B, what should I do? So the should do is probably some quadrant 2 stuff. You know, maybe you have a major proposal due in a month, and instead of putting that off until the weekend or day before, we work on that a little bit today. So what should we be doing? And then C would be a nice to do. You know, maybe that's a quadrant 3 area. So my buddy Troy calls me, it's urgent to him, it's important to him, it doesn't really fall into my plan for my day, but maybe it would be a nice thing to do and it fits in because of that relationship building. So we're never going to do a B item, a should do, when there's an A item, a must do still on our list. So we're going to complete all the A's and then we'll look at the B's, and we're never going to do a C, a nice to do. I'm not going to help my buddy Troy out if I still have A and B's left on my list. And that's a hard thing to do. Does this make sense? So here's the question you can ask yourself. When you get stuck, what can you do, and only you do, which if done well will make a real difference? What can you do, and only you do, which if done well will make a real difference? So if it's not only me that could do it, maybe I delegate that, right? That's a whole nother mastermind we could talk about. But maybe I delegate that task. And, you know, by delegating a task, that is the one way I can kind of expand my time because I've kind of duplicated myself. So think about that. What can you do? And only you do that. If you do it really, really well, it's going to make a difference. Now, what does that mean? Make a difference. Well, that could be work. That could be home. That could be your health. And it can change throughout your day. So you wake up this morning, what can I do right now? That may change in an hour. May change tomorrow. It may change after lunch. So it's a question that we constantly have to ask ourselves if we're doing these activities, is this really the best use of my time? And that's the number one time management question, right? I think Brian Tracy came up with it. What's the best use of my time right now? And if we sort through all those other things that we've talked about today, I think it gets us going. And before we open up the questions, you know, most of this came out of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. If you haven't read the book, man, I strongly recommend it. It's got to be one of the top 5 books, business books ever written, in my opinion. I just think it's phenomenal. And it's not material he came up with. He just did a really good job of compiling a lot of great information and presenting it in a way that's easy for us to absorb. So keeping all that in mind, how do we take that information, knowing that we're all busy and getting busier? Is there anyone that would disagree with that? I know it's true in my life. And how do we best apply it? And, keep in mind, there's this other thing called comfort zones. So Nancy's got a comfort zone, and Nancy's comfort zone has other people around her, and they've got comfort zones that are dependent on where she's at, right? So she takes these concepts and judging by how she raised her hand on the goals, she's already probably applying a lot of this. But as she stretches her comfort zone, that affects maybe Troy's comfort zone because he's up next to her. And now all of a sudden he's getting uncomfortable because, hey, Nancy, what are you doing? You're starting to stretch your comfort zone. And then Philip's over there and he's like, hey, Troy, quit messing with your comfort zone. That's messing with my comfort zone. And you can see how people start to get uneasy as we start to apply concepts in a mastermind like this. And that's when you start hearing the naysayers. Hey, what are you doing? You can't really do that. Get back into your zone because that makes me comfortable, especially when you're looking at a priority list and you're trying to decide what's important to you and not important to you. I see Andrew nodding. He gets that. So how can we apply some of this to our daily lives immediately? What kind of things are running through your head right now about this type of information?
Hey, Shawn, it's Brian. The thing that sticks with me is what we got out of the Productivity Ninja discussion. Every day now, I'm thinking about my business and what moves it forward. I'm writing down those 5 items on a sticky note, and it sits there right on my computer throughout the day, and those are the first things I'm concentrating on. Or if I know that it's something I've got to do in the afternoon, that I'm setting aside time for my priorities at that point.
And how's that working for you, Brian? How many times out of a week, if you did that all 5 days of the week, what percentage would you say you're able to stick to that list and get it accomplished?
I like me who can, get distracted by the squirrel on occasion. 80% is a good score. I'm striving for 100.
Right.
But,
no, 80 is great.
I'm feeling good about it right now. So.
And if you look at where you were before, that's an incredible improvement, right?
Oh yeah.
Any other thoughts? Andrew, you were nodding your head pretty good. What are you thinking about?
Yeah, similarly, in the sense of the importance of writing down what's the most important thing I can do today, what would be nice to do, and then making sure that you understand the difference between those items, and then in context with the not urgent but important things that if I don't take care of, eventually they're going to move over to the urgent, right? And so I'd rather be able to do that strategically rather than rush it. And if it's one of the most important things to drive my business forward, I want to give it the attention it deserves so that I have the high quality that will truly drive my business forward, or relationships forward, or health and wellness forward.
Absolutely. And keep in mind, and I know we're business oriented in this mastermind, but keep in mind, this is life, right? We do a really good job, especially here in America, separating things, right? That's my business, that's my profession, personal. But when we look at our priorities and we look at our goals, it's encompassing who we are and what we want to accomplish. And when you really start to take a holistic view of that, that creates your own personal balance of what's important. So it's not a 50-50 proposition for most people. I don't think it's 50% of my time in my business and 50% of my time in my personal life. Some days it's 90% business. Other days it's 100% family, right? But it's always moving me personally towards whatever goals I'm trying to accomplish. Great feedback, Andrew. Thank you.
Shawn, I was thinking also about Stephen Covey's book. I've read it several times and I agree with you. So powerful. But if you also think about that book, all 7 habits are focusing on quadrant 2. There's a reason for that, right? Exactly what you said. We default, I know coming from the corporate world, it was all hair on fire, quadrant 1 stuff, day in, day out, people in your office. But you know what? If we absolutely focused on more of the preventive and the proactive stuff in quadrant 2, which is exactly what all 7 habits are about, that's just so powerful. And I love your reminder of what can I do? And only I do. Boy, that's a convicting one, because so many times, well, only I can do it. I'm the only one that can do that perfectly. Are you kidding me? Really? Is that really true? Can I delegate it effectively as long as I delegate correctly? But boy, that's a tough one. That's a convicting one, because how many people I know, including myself, oh, only I can do that. I mean, I've got to touch it. I've got to put my spin on it. No, you don't. Delegate it and free up time and spend more time in quadrant 2. So thanks for that reminder, Shawn.
Well, we talk a lot as business coaches too about helping our clients understand the value of their time, right? And especially when a business is trying to scale. Well, it's easy to say, yeah, I'm the only one that can straighten the front of the store. Really? I mean, is that the best use of your time? Are you really the only one that can do that? And if we take what the ninja said, where we have 10 days worth of stuff on our to-do list, well, how many of those 10 items or how much of that 100% of that, how much could we delegate to someone else to make sure it gets done? So I think you're right. It's a convicting question, and really, I think it even does more to convict me about procrastination, because I'll admit it, man. If I leave it to me, I'm one lazy dude. I can promise you. I'd rather be laying in my hammock reading a book, with a drink with some little umbrella in it. I'm perfectly happy. So, if I leave myself to my own convictions, I'm lazy. Well, oftentimes I think we pick things that we're doing because it gives us that feeling of accomplishment, like email. Right? Oh man, I got rid of 17 emails today. Well, that's great. They were all spam. You could have done that at 11 o'clock this evening. Was that really the only thing you could do? Was that the best use of your time? Did that really move you forward to your goals? No, but I can say I accomplished something. If I often look at clients' to-do lists, and when you really start to analyze everything they have on their list, and you ask that question, Troy, it really pops up, right? Oh, really? Are you the one that has to decide on that? Well, yeah, exactly. So yeah, you're great. That's a great point, Troy.
Portland has hundreds of emails, so he knows all about that.
Only 970 a day, no problem.
Hey, you're coming down. That's pretty good.
Well, we went through a new Microsoft update for blocking or whitelisted emails, so I got to go back through and whitelist everybody again.
That's why you didn't get my email. I hate it when that happens.
I was in a meeting one time, and the guy he wasn't talking about time management as an off the cuff comment. He said, hey, if you want to experience true freedom, go back to your office and hit delete all. And a lot of people turned around at their tables, especially teams that were sitting there, and you could see the managers going, you're not doing that, But I experienced a software glitch that did create a delete all. And it was amazing to me how many of those emails really weren't important. I mean, I can only think of one that it was like where it did cause a problem, that I didn't get, really it was more that I needed that information to move forward, not so much a response issue. But so yeah, it is interesting how we get tied to silly things.
I like
what other thoughts do we have? Greg, what about you, brother?
I really don't have anything else to add right now, but anybody hasn't already said it. I mean,
well,
I'm a list
keeper.
Your
profession, time's really important, right?
Yeah, and I'm a list keeper. I put my, quadrant 2 stuff down every night, at the end of the night, for whatever's the next day. And, I accomplish those because they're usually the more time consuming, busier times. And I usually will block time out for the next day in the morning to get it done, and leave the afternoon open for other stuff that's quadrant 3 or 4.
Fantastic. And the ninja talked a little bit about that. He said to look at when are you at your best, right? And he talked about, I think 2/3 of the people are morning people or something like that. I forget exactly what he said, but knowing yourself and when you're at your best for that deep thinking, that quadrant 2 stuff, and playing your day around that. So if you're an afternoon person, maybe you're blocking off from 1 to 3 to really do some of that deep thinking work that needs to get done. If you're a morning person, he recommended doing that as you're doing, Greg, first thing in the morning. So I think understanding that and doing those types of things is critical. And I'm a time blocker myself. You know, and all too often we'll have a major project, right? It could be working with a client or something we want to accomplish, and we put it off and put it off, and we procrastinate it until the timeline forces us to do it. And as we said, when you're rushed, when you're urgent, you're probably not doing your best work. Yeah, it can happen, but more times than not, something suffers. Nancy, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I had a question, and I apologize if it was answered in your productivity ninja. So when I look at my list, well, I've experimented with different ways, and I'm a list person too, but I don't think I'm doing it the best because, well, I experimented with digital and I don't like that. I like it in front of me and the physical act of, marking things, but things on the list, some of them are like one phone call and some of them are big projects that I know I won't get done in one day. So what is the way to handle that where they're not all the same amount of time required for them?
All right. So the first thing I would do is sort that list by importance. So is the phone call more important than the project? And list that out. So once you have that kind of what we talked about, ABC type deal, then what the ninja talked about and what a lot of research is showing right now is that most people are able to concentrate for somewhere between 45 minutes and 90 minutes max. Really deep focus. That anything beyond that, and tons of studies are being done on that, really you start to diminish pretty quickly after about 90 minutes. You might think you're doing a lot, but they've shown it really starts to go down. So if it's a big project, do what Greg's talking about. It's what I do. I think a lot of people do it, is time block your calendar. So when you're doing your planning for the week, maybe Sunday night, that's when I do it. I sit down and I look at my week, and if I know I have something that's going to take me, say, 3 hours, maybe I'm doing an hour Monday night, an hour Tuesday morning, an hour Thursday at noon, and I'm blocking that time, and I treat that just like an appointment.
Okay.
So I don't let, Cortland calls me and says, hey man, let's go to lunch. I'm like, I'm booked Thursday. I'm sorry, but I'll be there Friday for you. You see what I'm saying? So it's on your schedule and it's marked busy. And then if you're part of an office or a shared calendar situation, they see that on your calendar. So now, Troy calls you and wants to book a meeting. I'm sorry, I'm already booked for that time.
Okay.
So the important part of that strategy is that you don't move it. Brian Tracy talks about the concept of eat the frog, right? And if anybody wants a copy of that book, Focal Point guys here can share that with you. I'd love to send you a copy. Just shoot me an email or send it in the chat, and we'll make sure you get a digital copy of that book. But he talks about eat the frog, and he says, hey, if you've got a really hard thing to do, a big thing to do it first. Because if you eat all your frogs through the week, it really doesn't matter what else you don't accomplish. You will have done more than most people do in a week.
Not
and
an
you will
appetizing
feel
phrase, but
that productivity. So does that help you, Nancy?
yes,
Does that
thank
kind of
you.
make
Yeah.
sense when you're
Yeah,
looking at
because
your
right, if
list?
it takes several hours, I'm like, ugh. And then you're right, break it out and just plan for it.
And so that quadrant 4, when I was saying there is times when we might want to spend time in quadrant 4. What research has shown is if you spend 45, 50 minutes really focused on a project, take a 10-minute break and just do something that is mindful, that's not business related. So maybe go for a walk outside. They show that's one of the biggest things. Seriously, walking outdoors. So not just walking, not hitting a treadmill, actually being outdoors has some effect on the body that rejuvenates us fairly quickly. But maybe it's just, that's when you're surfing social media for 5 or 10 minutes. But you set a time frame on it. You don't get sucked into 15 minutes. You don't get sucked into 11 minutes. 5 to 10 minutes just to rejuvenate the brain. And then we can focus again for another 45, 50 minutes. And then, like I say, they say 90 minutes is about the max. People can really do deep thinking, hard work where we're focused. The other benefit of blocking that time is to allow yourself not to be interrupted, right? It doesn't do us any good to block that time and be focused on something if someone can walk in our door, or we look at the phone, or we want to respond to an email.
Right.
Because the minute we break that concentration, we're kind of starting over. It doesn't just cost us the 5 minutes that we looked at the email. Now I gotta, where was I? Now I gotta get back in the zone, all those thoughts, things that I may have lost. So really, really, really protect that time.
Perfect. Thanks.
What other thoughts do we have?
Yeah, it's awesome. I want to add to Nancy. I talked talking about a big project, I think it's great to, like you said, break it up into multiple time blocks. But I think you have an additional opportunity here. But as you break up those time blocks for that project, get really specific about the tasks that you want to accomplish in that time block, because we know we always get that jolt of dopamine when we check off that we've completed something. And then I think also by getting granular around what task you hope to accomplish, you may find an opportunity to sort of delegate or pass off one of those tasks to somebody in your network or in your office. That'll create additional productivity for you. Thanks.
That's a fantastic point, Austin. And you're right. You're right. If you break down that task, maybe you have to start it, but then you can hand that part off.
Yes.
And you're probably, Austin, you're right. Some of the sections may take 90 minutes. Some may only take 30.
Right.
So we can block different areas of time. That's a great point. Thank you for sharing that. Karen,
Sure.
I saw you'd raised your hand. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, good day, family. Thank you for this information. It's been awesome. Could you go back over you had the ABCs and C was nice to do in quadrant 3. I missed the first 2, please.
So the first one are things that we must do. That's the A's. I have to do this. This is urgent and important. If I don't do this now, there are consequences that I do not want to face. And then the B is it'd be nice to do. Things that I should do. I'm sorry, B is things I should do. So that's like your quadrant 2 stuff. Like I should plan for tomorrow. I should review my goals. I should go to the gym. I should plan my meals out so that I'm not jumping by Jack in a Box and getting $10 tacos and gorging myself, right? So it's those types of things. And then C are those would be nice to do. Any other thoughts? We've got about 10 minutes left here.
Shawn, I can do December 6th from 11 to 11:30 for that lunch.
Only 30 minutes? Brother, you and I could not go to lunch and only spend 30 minutes. That would never happen. Now, maybe 11:30 till 7 or 8, we're good. Miguel, what are your thoughts?
I think what you said is very important, especially in the to-do list, because like we talk in the Eat That Frog, you have to take those tasks that are repetitive, not important, and sometimes get it out of the way or postpone them. That's when you procrastinate some things that are not important and focus on the ones that require attention. Like Andrew said, require quality or things that need to get done right, but postpone some of the repetitive ones, the small ones, for later. So sometimes it's good to procrastinate. And going back to the productivity ninja, you have to plan your day ahead and use your tools in paper, because if not for me, I forget the next day and it doesn't happen if you don't write them. So it was very good.
Yeah, he talked about, you're right. And that's something we haven't talked about. He talked about having a second brain, right? That was a big part of his presentation. And you have to have a place to put those thoughts that happen during the day, or those events that happen during the day. And if we just try and he talked about mental Post-it notes, you try and keep those sorted in your brain, it doesn't work for very long, right? This myth of we're going to multitask just doesn't happen. I'm a big bullet journal guy, right? And it was started by a guy that has attention disorder. And it's just a place to record the things I need to remember that happen through the day, right? And then at the end of the day, I can review that and decide what I want to accomplish tomorrow. And then I make my list based on my priorities. And it's amazing to me at the end of the week, how many of the things that when I started Sunday night that I thought were so important, I never got to. They never rose to a level in my day of importance where it was number one. So Friday night, well, I don't do it Friday night, but the next Sunday, I'll look back over that week and go, okay, what didn't I accomplish that I thought I wanted to accomplish? Oh, wow, I guess this isn't that important. And I can start scratching actually things I thought were really important end up falling off of my list. And that happens just about every week. It always amazes me because I'm pretty diligent. I really got to do this. I need to do that. Now, lunch with Cortland would never fall off of that list, but I would start it and kind of move it. Does that make sense, Miguel? Great point. what other thoughts do we have around this concept? Or let's say this. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say, I thought it was helpful thinking about disruptions and how disruptions, you can be concentrating on something really well, and you've got alarms and notices and things that can disrupt you from that. And you need to turn those off so you can concentrate. But I also thought it was very valuable, the suggestions that we had about setting expectations and almost saying, don't be the person that responds to every email, within an hour, within 2 hours. And he's even suggesting putting on your salutation or your emails. If this is urgent, call me on my phone. So if it's really urgent and important, then call me on the phone and we'll address it right away, because that's the definition of urgent and important. But if it's just important, I'll respond within a day. So I think that, to me, that's an interesting trick. And I've started trying to use that more often to kind of set expectations, protect, as he says, to be vigilant about protecting your important thinking time. And I find that's one way to do that. And I've shared that with my sons, who are working in roles where they constantly get interrupted by contractors and demands on their time and phone calls and emails that they aren't urgent and important, but they are important. And so I think that kind of setting an expectation of, if it can be responded to within a day or so, then that's good. And the person is expecting that. But they also realize, if it's really urgent, pick up the phone and call. So
it's a great point. Really, what we're talking about with priorities is, we're setting expectations with ourselves, right? That's what our priorities are. Here's what we expect. Yeah. Here's what I expect to accomplish. Here's what's important to me. That's what I'm saying. It's a great point. And he did, the ninja talked a lot about that, right?
I also
those
found
expectations.
Yeah. The other thing I've shifted towards, instead of Sunday night kind of reviewing the week and planning for the coming week, I've tried shifting it to the end of the week, like Friday afternoon. And I'm finding it's easier to put things down and say, just put it out of mind for the weekend that way. So kind of review what happened for the week. You kind of have some good thinking time about it, plan what's coming for the coming week. And you can kind of set things aside for a couple of days that way. I'm not thinking about what did I forget on Saturday or Sunday.
Right.
So that was an interesting thing I've toyed with too.
Good point. And I'll tell you, on the time block, first thing I do in the morning after I've got my blocks, I set alarms in my phone, start and stop times, and I hold to it. So it goes off 10 minutes before I'm supposed to start something and 10 minutes before it ends. That way I'm not running over, I'm not running short, I'm not missing things. It really does help. So we've got, it's about 10 till. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We are very adamant about that in this mastermind. What are some of the key takeaways from our conversation today that you think you could take and apply right away that hopefully will make a difference in what you're doing? Yes, ma'am.
Putting things in the right priority and the right quadrant so I can spend more time in the right places. That's been valuable today. Thank you.
Fantastic.
I'm going to take what you and Austin suggested. So I'm going to break down the bigger projects into tasks like Austin suggested, and then also do that prioritization like Karen just mentioned. So that's really helpful to me, instead of everything being on one list and it's not comparable to each other.
Fantastic. Any others?
I'm going to strike things off the list when I realize it's been on there too long and it's not important. So strike it, get rid of it.
Yeah, that's an amazing feeling when that happens. It's really weird because you're like, I put it on the list. That's the thing. It's like, I made this list.
Yeah.
And now it's all of a sudden not important.
Yeah, the 80-20.
Yeah, you question your own sanity on that.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a great task. Thanks for that, Bill.
And Shawn, I like the conviction of, what is it that only I can do that I need to focus on, and other things that I need to remove off my list and delegate accordingly to people that are more efficient and effective and going to do it much better than I am. Why am I keeping those on the list? So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Very cool. Any others?
Yeah, just a quick one. It's those quadrant 2 activities. I think you probably mentioned parts of this, but it's another way to think about it. It's those things that are really, really important that are going to drive the success of our business, our careers, but there's no deadline attached to them. So if we think about planning for our business, goal setting, developing our personal skill set or training, those, we know those important, but there's nobody, if you don't do them, there's nobody that's going to come to you and say, hey, you were supposed to do this, you didn't do it, get yourself in gear. So this is where kind of the mindset about what's really, really important really comes into being. And I'm not making a plug for coaching, but this is where having an accountability partner, whether it be a coach or somebody else, can be really, really valuable, because there's nobody inside your organization that's is attaching a deadline to it. It's just those things that we know are important, but unfortunately, they don't have deadlines attached to them.
No, you're absolutely correct. Quadrant 2 stuff's not going to jump up and say, hey, I need attention here. Quadrant 1 will, right? That phone's going to ring 17 times. You're going to get 8 emails from that client because you haven't answered them in 2 minutes. You're going to have the employee knocking down your door because you haven't given them attention, right? You're going to have that kid screaming, oh my gosh, Johnny broke his arm. Quadrant 1 will jump up and demand your attention. Quadrant 2 doesn't. It'll sit there, and until you act upon it, it'll just sit there. You're absolutely right, Austin. Great point.
Yeah, the best is when quadrant 2 becomes quadrant 1 because you didn't give it the attention that it needed.
There you go.
Start playing fireman, right? Well, guys, that takes us till about 5 till. Thank you for being here. We do this every month. We'd love to have everybody back again. And I'd love the feedback on how you were able to apply some of this stuff and how'd it work? What thoughts do you have? And everybody here is becoming a pretty tight community. Don't hesitate to reach out to each other and get some feedback and accountability as well. I mean, the whole idea of this mastermind is to help each other grow and do better, not just in business, but in life in general. So don't hesitate. If there's something I can do or anybody else on the screen, reach out. And I made a copy of the chat. If you don't know how to do that, the 3 little dots to the right at the bottom, you can save the chat. And I will, anybody that asks for a copy of that, Eat the Frog, I'll make sure to get that out to you later today, probably be late this evening. So don't panic if you don't see it right away, but I will get to it this afternoon.
Not urgent.
But it's important because I said I would do it.
Thank you.
So I will make sure that it happens. And if for some reason you don't see it tomorrow, email me, Shawn at Thrive, THRIVE 2 win.com, and remind me, because something happened in the email. I got something wrong because I promised you.
Shawn at what?
Shawn, SHAWN at Thrive, THRIVE,
Thrive.
2 win.com.
Okay.
Thrive to Win. So if you don't see it from me tomorrow morning when you check your email, and you don't stay in your email, you just check it. Then shoot me one and say, hey man, this is important and now it's urgent, and I will get you that right out. I'll make sure something happened to the connection there.
Thanks a lot.
Guys, have a fantastic week. Have a fantastic day. Thanks for being here. We look forward to seeing you again next month.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Shawn. Thanks, team. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Y'all have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Take care.